Hello, you're watching Policy Beats with me, Hamzah Rifaat. The Afghan reconciliation process has taken a bit of a boost with the terms of references which have been agreed upon between the Taliban and the Ashraf Ghani government in Doha. Now, this agreement has ensured that the stalled negotiation process could actually move forward. Both sides seem to be seeing each other eye to eye to try and make sure that a lasting political solution to the Afghan quagmire can actually materialize. Now, what does this mean? Can we actually claim that these terms of references could herald the start of the negotiation process, or are we looking at more pessimism instead of optimism? Joining me is senior diplomat and Ambassador Asif Durrani, who's also been posted in Kabul as well. Ambassador Durrani, thank you so much for joining me on Policy Beats.
Thank you.
Now, you're very welcome. Now, I just want to ask you a very simple question, if we are just kickstart this discussion. Are the Afghans ready for reconciliation?
Hamza, I think it's a very good question, but at the same time, it is very difficult also, because Afghanistan is in turmoil for the past 4 decades. And especially after the 9/11, what you are witnessing is in front of us. But a breakthrough came in February when America and Taliban, they agreed for the peace process. And but again, you find that there were many hitches, there were many roadblocks, and on the exchange of prisoners issues,
right,
which almost took 7 months to come to this pass that on 12th of September, they agreed to resume the dialogue, intra-Afghan dialogue, between Taliban and the Ashraf Ghani government delegation led by former chief executive Abdullah.
Right.
Now again, since issues are so complex and it is all power play, and they want to grab power to the maximum or go to the maximalist positions by the two sides, that it took another almost 3 months to agree to a procedure. It's a procedural breakthrough that now they have agreed that how to go about it. In a way, you can say now they have agreed to the agenda of the dialogue, which in fact had been paralyzed during the past 3 months. Now, I would rate it as a breakthrough. There is no doubt about it. It's a stepping stone.
Mm-hmm.
It's a big milestone, and hopefully, then it will in fact usher a dialogue towards peace process. However, one has to be very cautious. So I can say I'm cautiously optimistic about the success of the dialogue.
Right. Now, but Ambassador Durrani, there are many experts and analysts who say that the Taliban is operating on 2 fronts. At one stage, they're believing that, the negotiation process with the Ashraf Ghani government should continue. On the other hand, you've seen the spike in violence across Afghanistan as well. And the fact that they control more than 50% of Afghan territory, where they challenge the writ of the state openly. That basically means that they might be adopting a dualistic or a hypocritical approach towards the negotiation process. Do you think that the Taliban is operating with this 2-front strategy, and do you think this bodes well for the negotiation process?
Well, I think violence has not stopped in Afghanistan. Whenever an opportunity arises, Ashraf Ghani government people, they hit Taliban. And whenever an opportunity offers itself, Taliban hit back to the government forces. But you will see that with the Americans, when Taliban have entered into an agreement on 29th February, not a single American soldier has been killed. So that was as a result of an agreement between the two sides. Here, I think, I fully agree with the view that this ceasefire should in fact be announced by the Taliban. They should agree for the ceasefire. Although there have been instances in the past, in other examples like Vietnam versus United States, they did, but those were 2 different countries and they were fighting. Here, now when you talk about intra-Afghan dialogue, so I think Taliban's logic that they will come to ceasefire, they'll agree to ceasefire once a peace agreement has been negotiated and successfully negotiated, or So that I don't think that is a sound logic. They have to, in fact, take steps which can lead Afghanistan towards peace. Now, it is incumbent upon all the parties involved in Afghan dialogue process, in peace process, that they have to contribute towards peace. And they have to be watchful of the spoilers. Spoilers, whether they are internal Afghan spoilers or their supporters from outside. So here it is very important that Taliban should not take any step which may, in fact, give a setback to the peace process. Same is true for the Ashraf Ghani government, that if they are interested in peace in Afghanistan, then I think they have to, being the government, sitting government, which has been recognized by the international community.
Right.
So they also will have to show magnanimity.
Right. So when we talk about magnanimity, Donald Trump, obviously, with just a few more months to go before Joe Biden, his successor, actually assumes office in the White House, he's claimed that 2,500 American troops would remain in Afghanistan to try and make sure that there's some sort of residual presence, and also for training purposes as far as the Afghan National Defense Forces are concerned. Now, if we look at the strategy that Donald Trump is employing, given the spike in violence, and you mentioned spoilers as well, can this withdrawal or this planned withdrawal be considered as premature?
It all depends, because the responsible withdrawal would, in any case, would be admissible, because it was the precipitous withdrawal which had been harmful for Afghanistan in the past.
Right.
And like Soviet troops, they left without putting up a government structure or a conciliation government in the country, which resulted in chaos. That after the Soviets left Afghanistan, there was total chaos. While the government of the time, led by Dr. Najibullah, could hold it for at least around 2.5 years.
Do you think a similar situation can transpire?
It can. Why not? Because this is Afghanistan, and those circumstances have not changed. The power play has not changed. So coming back to President Trump's, in fact, he was keen to withdraw the troops by Christmas. But now his defense secretary has announced that by 15th of January, they'll reduce it to 2,500.
Right.
Under the agreement with the Taliban, the American government will be bound to withdraw the American troops by May 2021. And but by then, Joe Biden would be in power. He'll take over on 20th of January next year, which means he's just less than 2 months away.
So speaking of absolutely. So speaking of Joe Biden and his strategy for troop deployment and what his AFPAC strategy, obviously the Americans like to coin the Afghanistan strategy as an AFPAC strategy. How do you think Joe Biden would actually go about this? Would he rescind the Donald Trump planned withdrawal, or would he believe that no, troop presence is extremely important because it's going to jeopardize American interests inside in this region?
Going by Joe Biden's previous, during the election campaign, his statements, he also supported withdrawal of the American troops, although he added a caveat that this should be a responsible withdrawal. So if you keep into account, then in that respect, I think leaving 2,500 troops, even if you are there,
right,
what does it mean? You will not be able to fight on the ground. You will only be relying on air power, and it would be left to the whatever government in power at that time. But the question is that you are talking about if the intra-Afghan peace process fails. And that is, in my view, that would be that scenario, which would be, in fact, we are right now talking about. But if intra-Afghan peace process succeeds, then I think the situation would be different. Even then, if the Americans want to retain their troops there, so I think that will be possible through a bilateral agreement. And for that, I think America will have to renegotiate with the dispensation which would be ruling at that time. Because right now in the intra-Afghan dialogue, one question is whether the present government in the present form is going to stay, or there'll be a national government, there'll be an interim government. So it all has to be discussed in the coming days and weeks by the two parties, i.e. Taliban and the Ashraf Ghani government's delegation.
Ambassador Durrani, you mentioned in the eventuality that the peace talks or the intra-Afghan dialogue fails. Now, the spillover effects would be there for the region, and Pakistan would not be, you could say, discounted on that front. Now, given Pakistan's geographical proximity to Afghanistan, its role in the facilitation of the peace process, and the fact that Pakistan itself has hosted the Muddy peace process as well, what should our policy be? I mean, we've officially stated that this is an Afghan-led problem, and the Afghans need to decide their fate. And we also have an official policy of neutrality. What should our policy be if the spillover effects of the failure of the intra-Afghan dialogue process is right at our doors?
Hamza, in case of failure, we'll be the first victim. And I can anticipate influx of more refugees to Pakistan, because failure means that they'll go back to fight again, both sides. And so that means, and if the Americans are also not there, and say even if Americans are there, they won't be able to do much except that they'll use air power. So they are using that air power even now to support Ashraf Ghani government.
Right.
So if you think that the scale of the war, civil war increases, so definitely people will run for their lives. They'll look for shelters in the neighborhood. And Pakistan has been a traditional route. There's no doubt about it. It happened when the Soviet troops withdrew. We had a fresh wave of refugees coming to Pakistan. Once, in fact, Taliban came into power, again we had a fresh wave of refugees. But after the 9/11, when Taliban were defeated, so then there was, return of Afghan refugees to Afghanistan. But still, we have close to 3 million Afghan refugees. And we have to be prepared. We have to gear for that also. We have to cater for that, because this is, again, let me repeat, this is Afghanistan, and the situation has been quite fluid for the past 4 decades. So here, the trust is a problem. Trust among the warlords, trust among different ethnic groups, trust among religious groups. So this is a big challenge, and this is now the third Afghan generation which is facing this distrust, and I think for them, and they are justified to be distrustful, because their leadership in Afghanistan have miserably failed in bringing peace to the country.
Right. Now, U.S. Special Representative of Afghanistan, Zalmay Khalilzad, is visiting Doha, where he's going to be speaking with the Qatari leadership as well as the Turkish leadership. And the topic, obviously, is the peace process inside Afghanistan as well. How significant has his role been in ensuring that the intra-Afghan dialogue process is, if not initiated, then at least facilitated?
I think Mr. Khalilzad has been the linchpin as far as these talks were concerned. And he, in fact, enjoyed the confidence of President Trump.
Right.
And his institutional memory is probably the oldest and most trustworthy as far as American policy towards Afghanistan is concerned. And he's an Afghan by himself. So in that respect, I think he has played a major role in actually, in fact, preparing the ground for Taliban-American peace process agreement. So I think he will be playing a major role, and he's already doing that. So his facilitation in fact, nudging the Ashraf Ghani government side, as well as Qatar's facilitation in providing that space, as well as
the terms of references were agreed upon in Doha.
Yes, and then of course, then Pakistan has also facilitated these dialogues. So when you talk about facilitation, it doesn't mean that we'll offer you tea and we'll offer you accommodation and all that. It's not boarding and lodging, but in fact, it is also, in a way, some help in to the interlocutors that how they can go by to, in fact, secure their interests as well as contribute towards peace.
Ambassador Asad Durrani, if we come towards the region's role in ensuring that the Afghan peace process is not only facilitate but ensure that you have a political dispensation which results in greater prosperity, what do you think the role of China would actually be? We've discussed the Biden strategy, we've discussed the Trump strategy. What about China? What role does Beijing play in this Afghan situation?
Always played a constructive role because China is mindful of the fact that Afghanistan is its neighbor, and they do not want any trouble along their borders, and especially when they have problem in Xinjiang, and there are reports that the Uyghur militants are also taking shelter in Afghanistan. So in that respect, they have been concerned. But at the same time, with regard to the peace process in Afghanistan, they have been fully supportive. And they also support the idea that the American troop withdrawal should be responsible. It should happen in a responsible manner. They also do not support an abrupt withdrawal from Afghanistan. Not only China. Let me also add here that Iran's role is also very important. They have been actually very supportive of the dialogue process, intra-Afghan dialogue process, as well as they have given a tacit support to agreement between the United States and Taliban. And then the immediate neighbors, these Central Asian states, which are Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and Turkmenistan. Actually, they look towards Russia for security purposes. So in that respect, then Russia's role is also very important, and they are also very supportive of a peace process. And I'll take back to you that the Taliban also approached all the neighbors, immediate neighbors of
including Russia.
Including Russia, yes. In fact, it was Russia which held the Moscow talks 2 years ago. And in fact, that set the ball rolling towards, and in fact, that set the stage for an intra-Afghan dialogue, which now you see in Doha.
We're seeing material.
So in that respect, and then the United States, Russia, and China, they also, and also Pakistan, they have also, in fact, have been on the same page. So here, I think there is a big consensus whereby China, Russia, and United States and Pakistan, they have been playing a major role.
So it's more like convergence of interest instead of divergence of interest.
That's correct. So, and I think that spirit is still working, and that should, in fact, should continue till the peace process reaches its logical conclusion.
Right, now if we talk about, just to stretch a little bit more on China, China is very skeptical about the ETIM, and you're talking about Xinjiang's unrest. Does that skepticism also translate into skepticism of the Taliban's motives as well? Do you think the Chinese would actually view, all right, we can't really concede too much ground to the Taliban? And Beijing, obviously, for reasons unstated, they've also claimed that they've been quite mum on the Doha peace agreement as well, which many would believe that you've conceded too much ground towards the Taliban.
I think with China, you need to understand how China, in fact, sees its neighbors. So they have already pursued a non-interference policy. Yes, they have been concerned about the ETIM, but they have never blamed it on Taliban for that, because in fact, ETIM have had support from those Al-Qaeda affiliated groups based in Uzbekistan. So in that way, I think if you look at it, then they had problems. Actually, Taliban had problems with Uzbekistan militants. So in that respect, I think Chinese their support to the peace process means that they are satisfied with the Taliban, they are satisfied with the Ashraf Ghani government, and they are also, but at the same time, they want that ETIM should not be encouraged. If they have bases, those should be dismantled.
And can the ETIM be encouraged by the presence of ISKP when we talk about the Islamic State in Khorasan province in Afghanistan? Do you think the Chinese, along with the Americans and all the other regional players, they would be concerned about the fact that the Islamic State is still there and we don't really know the outcome of the intra-Afghan dialogue process?
I think these, if you are referring to Al Qaeda, almost is finished.
Yeah.
And,
I'm referring to the Islamic State.
If the Islamic State you are referring to Daesh or ISIS, I think they are also very few in number. And I don't think that they can make any difference. They may perhaps enact some terrorist activities here and there, which they have been doing. But their role as they became dominating force in Iraq and Syria and they could establish their own state, I don't think that stage is going to come anytime.
All right, finally, Ambassador Durrani, when we speak about futuristic scenarios, I mean, based upon your experience as a diplomat who was also served in Kabul as well, where do you see the current, what is the current status quo going to lead to as far as Afghanistan's future is concerned?
I think it is not purely a status quo. It is moving, but with a snail's pace.
With the snail's pace.
So that's why I said in the beginning that I'm cautiously optimistic. And I think we should keep our fingers crossed because this time the qualitative change which you see in the dialogue process and other stakeholders in the overall Afghan situation, i.e. The Afghan parties as well as immediate neighbors. There is a consensus that there should be peace. However, there are vested interests inside Afghanistan, and they don't want peace in the country because it is their bread and butter that Afghanistan should suffer because that's how they prosper. And then for that, I think, and Pakistan is rightfully concerned that I think India has been playing a role of a spoiler. And I think that has been highlighted to important capitals, including United States, Russia, and China, that they should counsel India not to spoil the show. So hopefully, I think good sense would prevail and Afghanistan would once again see peace as they saw during former King Zaid Shah's time.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Ambassador Durrani, for joining me on Policy Beats. Now, cautious optimism is the term that we're going to be using as far as Afghanistan's future scenarios are concerned. The terms of references which have been agreed upon between the Ashraf Ghani government and the Taliban bodes well for the future of Afghanistan, and it is a positive sign. However, we also need to be pretty much cognizant of the internal dynamics which Afghanistan basically has, which relates to the ethnic differences, which relates to so many other areas that need proper attention. Now, with that, I will conclude this program, and you can join Policy Beats with Hamzah Rifaat on our social media pages as well. Till then, take care and Allah Hafiz.